Thank you, everyone, for coming. Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of Monday, June 15th. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, thank you everyone for coming this afternoon. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Opens Meeting Act is posted in the back of the chamber. Clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on that item and only on that item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant then and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed to that item second. The applicant may then take one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, whether you're speaking in favor or against the proposed item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker per item. After all public hearings, the council then will vote on the resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, which will be, we had one last week, and then it will be June 29th, will be immediately prior to the adjournment. Anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda on that date, or nor plan for a future agenda. Clerk, will you please call the first item of business?
For today's agenda, our first items of business will be the consent agenda, sections 1 and 2.
Anybody would like to come speak on those items 1 and 2? Seeing none.
We can go ahead and vote on those items.
Go ahead, please call the roll.
Oh,
We need a motion.
Move to it.
items 2A and 2B introduced by Christensen.
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded that we approve items 1A and
2A, 2B.
2A and 2B.
2B. Okay. Any comments? Questions? Please call the roll.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Okay.
Our next item on the agenda would be section 4, which is our public hearing liquor resolutions. I'll be calling items 4A and 4B together. Application of Tomahawks LLC, doing business as Tomahawks Axe Throwing, for a Class A liquor license located at 815 O Street, Suite 100, and the related manager application of Alina Satel.
Thank you for coming down.
Mr. President, members of the council, my name is Mike Kelly, 2804 South 87th Avenue in Omaha. I'm representing these folks. As you know, they were here about 6 months ago on a similar application. We thought maybe we would try it again, maybe with some amendments and some due diligence we didn't do last time. As I watched your hearing from before, and I believe basically there were 4 issues that were bothering people. One was they failed to disclose a lot of their criminal record, which a lot of it was fairly minor misdemeanors, but there was a lot of them, and they didn't disclose them. The second issue was just the venue itself. We're going to allow alcohol sales with axe throwing. Third was the location in the Haymarket, and the fourth was the manager had a pretty extensive record. Regarding the failure to disclose, I'll just basically tell you, in mitigation, they're younger folks, and this was sloppy and inexperienced. They just didn't understand the seriousness of this application. You've got to get everything together. They didn't do that. They have done it this time. The venue itself, the axe throwing, I went down and looked at one of these, and I don't understand the younger folks today. I don't understand their music. I don't understand Xbox. I don't understand Facebook. None of it. Certainly don't understand axe throwing. But I went down and looked at one of these, and actually they're pretty neat places. And they're talk about safe. They have coaches. They watch it supervised. It's more supervised than a bowling alley or pool hall ever would be, or a dart tournament. So I was certainly satisfied with the venue there that they have, these folks do even more. They have breathalyzers as well, which I think will solve the next problem, which is the location with the younger clientele they're going to have in the Haymarket. They have breathalyzers, portable breathalyzers, which neat technology that they have nowadays, which can do that on the spot. And if anybody's 08 or above, they're not going to be allowed in the establishment, much less use a lane to throw darts. Remember now, these lanes are all wired like a cage. So you think of a bowling alley coming out the gutters with a wire mesh all the way on the top and everything. So there's one person at a time. They're taught how to throw it. It's becoming a rage all around the country. Fourth thing I think that was bothering people was the manager we proposed at the time had it just had a lengthy record, nothing terrible, but a lot of entries. He's backed away from that now. He's still a part owner, small owner, and then we placed with a different manager. She's here today, as two of the owners are, if you have any questions for them. She has a very good record, except for a DUI 11 years ago. I think she's learned her lesson. She's now a mom, much more responsible person in her personal life. So I don't think that's an issue going forward. She has experience in the industry. They are open now. Alcohol is really a secondary thing of this. Basically, people are going there to throw the axes, just like you'd go to bowl or play pool. But nowadays, with the way we do alcohol, I mean, you have alcohol at nail facilities and barber shops, and I don't totally understand it, but that people want it available, even though they're not going there for that. So we do need it, but it's not going to be something that would be a problem going forward. Also, you placed some conditions, or talked about placing conditions last time. It's never happened because of you voted to deny. But we accept any reasonable conditions you want to put on. And I'm comfortable that the Liquor Commission, especially the current makeup of the commission, will enforce anything you put on. And we certainly acquiesce and agree to it ahead of time. So I think you can have confidence. You don't have a guarantee. I think you can have confidence that they'll enforce anything you do. So with that, we're here for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Do we have some questions for Mr. Kelly? Jane? Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for coming down to testify before us today. Could you tell us a little bit about your safety plan for customers who would like to come and like to have a drink and throw?
Well, sure. Number one, they're subject to breathalyzers when they come in the door.
When they come in the door.
So if they're showing any signs of intoxication, they're obviously going to be breathalyzed. And if there's any issue, if they're 08 or above, they're not allowed entry. That's the first thing. Second thing, they have a manual that's very impressive. I don't know if you've got it, but on all their safety features. And you have to use their equipment. They teach you how to throw. There's a whole battery of them. I'm probably not the right person to explain it to you, but they have a battery of them. And again, they have coaches assigned to every lane. So if you go in there to do it, you're going to extra, you're going to be coached and told how to do it. And they'll be watching you and observing you. If anybody would be anywhere out of line, they're going to be removed.
And how are they monitoring the drinking? How are they keeping track?
Well, you've got a bartender observing that, and if anybody, I think if you have more than 2 or 3, first of all, people aren't going there to drink. But I understand somebody might, and it's a fair question, their bartender and the staff are going to monitor that, plus the coaches. And more importantly, I think they will monitor their behavior. If anybody's acting a little weird or off, they're not going to be allowed to stay in there.
Okay.
Now, this is a new concept to me, but I went and observed it, and it's slick the way they do it.
Any other comments for Mr. Kelly?
I have a question about,
Yep.
I have a question about the breathalyzer. So you take the breathalyzer before you come in to the establishment?
Yes.
Do you take the breathalyzer before you throw a tomahawk if you've been drinking, or an axe?
Well, you wouldn't have to take it twice. If you came in and you were 00,
Yeah.
they're going to let you just go proceed and purchase a lane. The way these people make money is on the purchasing of the lanes. Mm-hmm. But if you're not subject, if you come in and your alcohol content is high, you're eliminated.
Okay. But once you've been there for a while, you can have...
Once you've been there for a
drinks?
while, the coaches will be monitoring that
Okay.
with staff, and of course the bartender. Mm-hmm. Again, this is not a bar where you're going to do lots of bar business. If you come up to me and have the third beer, I'm gonna know you.
Okay.
Because there are not that many people drinking. You know, more spectators.
Okay.
If I went in there to watch my son throw the axes, I would probably be having more beer than he would be. Because he's busy competing.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
To follow up on Councilwoman Washington's question, the breathalyzer, is that everyone or people that show signs? Will it be a triage type thing?
Well, I think that's going to be to be determined by how their customers come in. I think at the moment, they would plan on anybody who had any symptoms at all of erratic behavior.
So it'd be
I
more-
don't know if they're going to plan to do everybody, but they will if you tell us to. And that's, we could. But somebody coming in, and again, I think the word will be on the speaking of social media, the word will be on the street with the kids. Hey, they don't be doing shots and expect to go up there and throw tomahawks because they have breathalyzers.
So that'd be more of a confirmatory test rather than a,
Right. Right.
thank you.
Yes, Jane?
Mr. Kelly, you had said that you and your clients are open to some reasonable restrictions.
Of course.
And I know when we gave approval for another retailer that would like to permit people to have drinks and to throw the axe, we required that anyone who would be doing that, in actively participating in throwing an axe, a tomahawk, that they have a 2-drink limit, and that they would be put under probation for 1 year with no violations, alcohol-related, injury-related violations for 1 year. Is that something your client
Yes.
would be
They're
willing to
total-
accept?
We talked about that. They're totally agreeable to that.
And it's only for those that are going to be participating in throwing the axe. Say if you're just a family member there to cheer them on, you can have a normal limit, a safe limit of drinking that
Right.
is customary. But I think
No, they're more than happy to abide by that. And again, folks who come in to throw the axe aren't really there to drink anyway. So it's really an easy thing to comply with. So of course, yes, we absolutely agree to that, plus the other condition you mentioned.
okay, that's great.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Kelly? Any other questions for the owners or the managers? Okay. Seeing none, let's move on.
I'll be calling
Thank you.
items
You bet.
4C and 4D together. Application of 4646 WH Investment Group, Inc., doing business as Fresh and Safe Market for a Class D liquor license located at 945 South 27th Street, and the related application of Tuan An Mai.
Thank you for coming down. Would you sign in when you get a chance? Your name and address? Swear him in, too? Tony? Yeah.
And then if you can raise your right hand, I can swear you in.
Okay. My name Tuan Mai.
Hold on,
Sure.
I have to swear and give you the oath. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
My name Tuan Mai. I'm living at 2550 Southville Circle in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay. And this is for the new market
Yes.
on South 27th Street, correct?
Yes.
Is this your first market?
This is the second one.
And your
I
other-
have the first one. I have IGA Marketplace.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions?
That's the IGA in Air Park?
Yes.
In the airport?
Okay.
Northwest. Any other questions for Tuan? Thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
Anybody else, any other person like to speak on these two items? Seeing none, let's go to the vote.
I need someone to
It needs to be moved.
introduce.
I'll move approval of item 4C and D.
Second?
And moved and seconded that we approve items 4C and D. Any other comments? Okay, please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
I move that we approve,
Go ahead.
Right,
Go ahead.
You gonna amend
Jane.
it?
yeah, I'm going to.
Okay, I'll move approval of item 4A and B.
Second?
Been moved and seconded that we approve item 4A and B.
And I would like to make a motion to amend with a couple of restrictions, with a 2-drink limitation on those individuals participating in throwing the axe, as well as a 1-year probation with no alcohol-related violations or accidents.
It's been
I'll
moved
second.
and seconded by Sandra on the amendment. Yes, Roy?
I just comment that I agree with the 1 year, but I don't see the necessity of the 2-drink maximum. It just hasn't seemed to be an issue anywhere in the state where this has been done, including here in Lincoln.
I have one comment to make, if I
Yes.
may. I just want to be consistent with, we handled the previous company and retailer that came forward with that. It was new to all of us, something that we are not familiar with, and we wanted to make sure that we were thinking of the public safety first and foremost, and to see how the establishment was able to work through some of these issues, and they did a great job. And so we have every expectation that this new company will execute flawlessly as well, because we recognize and acknowledge that people do have a great time going to these establishments, but we do want to err on the side of caution and make sure that we treat everyone fairly and pretty much the same when it comes to things that involve public safety and access. So I think it's a good idea, and we try to be consistent.
Thank you, Jane. Benny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Guys, help me remember the 2-drink limit where if you were throwing, once you decided to cease throwing, the limit was suspended?
That's
So it's
right.
lifted, yes.
Yep.
So as long as I'm in an alley, I can have a when I realize I'm losing the game and don't want to throw anymore.
So I guess
Yes.
my comment is the reasons we suspended that 2-drink limit before, I think, still apply here. Because there have been no cases in the state of Nebraska where it's been an issue, and it's important to realize that all of the server-seller restrictions still apply whether you're throwing an axe or not. The people who are serving the alcohol are still responsible to make sure the person does not become over-intoxicated. And I think by setting a 2-drink limit, it may be sending the wrong message to the public about this activity. The bartender gave me the drink, so it must be okay. And that might not be the case. Maybe somebody slips in who doesn't get breathalyzed, who maybe should have been, and the bartender still has the same responsibility to make sure over-service does not occur, regardless of a 2-drink limit. And the 2-drink limit, I think, just puts a false sense of safety in there.
Yes.
Mr.
Sandra?
Chairman, I agree with Councilman Raybold that equitable treatment, the first application had these restrictions. I think this is reasonable for 1 year, and if they get through the year with no accidents, no violations, all restrictions are pulled back and we can move forward. But I certainly can support taking a safe and cautious approach to each new venture that involves sharp objects being thrown and alcohol.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the amendment? Please call the roll on the amendment.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay. Please, any other comments or thoughts on the main motion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, let's move on
Fourth in a
to
row.
resolutions.
Fourth in a row.
Our next section of the agenda is our public hearing resolutions. Items 5A is accepting and approving the report of new and pending claims against the city for May 1st through May 31st, 2020.
Do we,
To ask the public, do they have any?
yeah, okay. Does the public have any comments or questions or would like to speak on behalf of new and pending claims against the city? Okay, seeing none, let's move on.
Our next item is item 5B, is use permit 140G, application of Iger Corporation to amend the use permit by removing the TRIP land use table and to adjust the perimeter setback at the northwest corner of the shopping center on property generally located at South 84th Street and Highway 2.
Good afternoon, members of the council. Danae Kalkowski, 1128 Lincoln Mall, Suite 105, appearing today on behalf of Iger Corp., developer of the shopping center at 84th and Highway 2. Today we have in front of you an amendment to the use permit for the north side of 84th and Highway 2, and we have two components to that amendment. The first component is that we're requesting a setback reduction, and I've got that highlighted in blue here. Just maybe, and it's from the adjacent property that's owned by a different landowner. So just a little history, if you remember way back when this project was being master planned, Pine Lake Road, was a section line road and went straight. And as part of the overall development plan, there was a plan to offset it and relocate it to eliminate some of the traffic to the west toward that Pine Lake neighborhood. And so since that time, Old Pine Lake Road right-of-way has been vacated. The south half of that right-of-way has been dedicated to the property owner to the south. The property on the north side and to the north is a different property owner. When we came in with an administrative amendment to show the uses on the south side here, it was brought up that this property right now is still zoned AGR, and so the appropriate setback from a commercial district to AGR is 100 feet. And so there was no mechanism at that time to ask for a reduction of that setback because it was under an administrative amendment. So we're now filing the formal amendment requesting the setback. Basically, we're requesting a 20-foot setback, which is appropriate to setback from another from another anticipated commercial use. This area is shown in the comp plan for commercial, anticipated to be future commercial, and just makes it a lot more efficient to try to do the layout now with a more appropriate 20-foot setback. If in fact, or when in fact, this actually develops as commercial, that setback would be reduced to 0 because there would be no need to have a setback for another commercial piece that really will be integrated into the overall development. I'll just show you one other map that helps show that. So, Planning Department is already required as part of this amendment for us to continue to show how the access is going to go from the property owned by Iger up through this property to the north to the access point on Pine Lake Road. So somebody turning in is really going to know no difference between that property being developed and the Iger property. So at some point in the future, it'd be appropriate for that setback to even go to 0. The second component of the use permit amendment request is the removal of the land use in the TRIP table. If you recall, a few months ago, we amended the annexation agreement to get rid of the TRIP cap, that it really was no longer necessary. After that, we basically brought in the use permit on the south side and removed the land use and TRIP table from that. And now this is the first time we're bringing a formal amendment through on the north side. So as part of this amendment, we're asking for the table to be removed on the north side also. This item was on consent agenda at Planning Commission, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions? Yes, Jane?
Danae, I just have a question about the road, the continuation of that road onto Pine Lake Road. Mm-hmm. Is that going to be a right-in or
yes.
a right in, right out only?
Yes,
Okay.
That is a right-in, right-out only access point.
Okay.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Yes, Sandra?
Chairman, hi, Danae. I have a couple of questions about the adjacent property. I know that your client doesn't own it, but I'm curious if you've had conversations with the adjacent property owner.
We have not specifically with regard to this amendment. Multiple conversations over the years about trying to purchase that property to integrate it into this development. At this point, the clients have never been able to come to terms on a sale of it. But I don't think there's any doubt that it's anticipated to be developed commercially in the future.
Okay. And then one last question. I am slightly familiar with the area. I drove past it recently, but I don't remember that it was an active ag property.
No, I think it's zoned AGR. I think it's just leftover zoning from prior, no development occurring out here. And since nothing's been brought forward on that property, it has been annexed. It's part of the city. It just hasn't come in for development, so the zoning is still an ag zone.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Any other questions for Danae? Seeing none. Any questions for staff? I may have one. David, if you'd like to come up.
David Carey with the Planning Department.
If somebody came through and wanted to do an R1, R2 on that property, the owner, the one that's next to this, would that be a zoning that would be compatible, or?
I think the idea of residential certainly could be compatible. As you probably know, but I'll make sure everybody is aware of it, that we have significant multifamily in that vicinity. I would think that the current value of the property, given that it could be commercial, probably would be such that they would want to try to do something commercial, or perhaps a higher density. But R3 would be fairly typical in a suburban setting, R4. If they didn't want to do multifamily, the little bit higher density, but certainly residential could be a possibility there.
Okay, and would we have any concerns about having a commercial zone next to our zone that close with no setback?
Not necessarily. I think the assumption here is that there's going to be a commercial zoning there, which is why we're talking about the zero setback eventually, potentially. But I think that if there was a strong interest in residential, I don't think we would be against that.
And would residential have to build the road connections through? I guess anytime we would come forward with any ask, or if I own the property and I was asking for a zone change,
Right.
that's when you would tell them that they would have to build a road.
Right. I think for circulation and the accessibility into the area that's already built, as well as that, what would be a new development, it makes sense to have some type of road that goes through there to make it work better. But yeah, generally speaking, the road improvement would be the responsibility of the developer.
Okay. I think if that was my ground, I would want to be able to go left. You would want to be able to go through the neighboring commercial area to go out and be able to go left.
That would be a challenge with that being that
Right
kind
in,
of.
right out only?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah, I think whenever we have a new proposal, we would have to look at that, but that certainly would have an access management aspect to that conversation.
Okay. Any other questions for David?
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else would like to come forward and speak on this item, which would be item 5B? Seeing none, let's move on.
Item 5C is approving the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement between the city and Microsoft Corporation, granting the city a license to use Microsoft software products for a 5-year term.
And we have Mr. Young here.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, thank you for the opportunity. The agreement before you is about 20 years old. We've had an EA agreement, enterprise agreement with Microsoft since I think 2001. This agreement is to renew and add Office 365 subscriptions to our agreement.
Any comments? Yes, Benny.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Young. Office 365 is the way where everybody's going. Would most of the employees still have a downloaded full version on their desktop, or will they be cloud-based only?
Our goal is to migrate away from on-premise storage to fully in the cloud with this agreement.
I'm sorry, I was meaning more about the application itself. With document storage in the cloud, I understand, but yeah.
So this agreement has 2 license levels in it. One is online only, and then one is a downloadable copy. And it depends on what each department's business case is. So some departments may choose the police or the sheriff. This is a joint city-county contract. The sheriff has a lot of deputies that are in the field that don't use Office a lot, but they may need to open or make minor edits. They would choose to use the online only.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Young?
It's been a long time coming, and it's been necessary, and I'm looking forward to seeing the savings and the efficiency of this contract being put in place.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come up and speak in favor or against item number 5C? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote on the resolutions.
Items 5A, accepting and approving the report of new and pending claims against the city for May 1st through May 31st, 2020, introduced by Bowers.
So moved.
Second.
And moved and seconded that we approve the claims. Any other comments, thoughts? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Washington,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 5B is the use permit 140G, application of Iger Corporation to amend the use permit by removing the trip land use table and to adjust the perimeter setback at the northwest corner of the shopping center on property generally located at South 84th Street and Highway 2, introduced by Bowers.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any comments, questions, thoughts? Okay, see none, please call the roll.
Bowers,
So, yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 5C is approving the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement between the city and Microsoft Corporation, granting the city a license to use Microsoft software products for a 5-year term, introduced by Bowers.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Sandra Washington. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ward,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you, everyone, for coming down. Move on to our third reading.
Okay, Section 6, Item 6A is amending Title II of the Lincoln Municipal Code to create Department of Aging by adding Chapter 2.40 entitled Department of Aging to the Lincoln Municipal Code and amending Section 2.02.020 to recognize Department of Aging as a city department within the city's administration.
This is also a continuation of the public hearing.
Yes, it is.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Randy Jones. I'm the Director of Aging Partners, a division of the City of Lincoln and part of the Mayor's Office. The Aging Partners has been seated with the Mayor's Office since its formation in the early 1970s. And since that time, we've been operating like a city department with a director appointed by the mayor, requiring council approval and the county commission's approval, and I also sit on the mayor's cabinet. The ordinance before you formalizes the recognition and authority of aging partners within the city as it's currently operating and also provides greater transparency. And I'll use an example. Past budgets have shown aging partners as a combination of the mayor's office's budget. If we continue to use that, it would show the mayor's budget being at $6.7 million. Well, actually, the actual cost of the mayor's budget alone, without aging partners connected, is 1.3. This year's budget is segregated and provides aging partners as a separate, unique view of the budget and fully reflects a transparent budget for both aging and the mayor. The Director of Aging Partners has the same authority of other departments and is recognized as having the same financial authority as other directors, including director's orders and requesting executive orders. This action does not expand city government, and there are no additional associated costs with this new ordinance. The ordinance essentially formalizes the operation as it exists today and provides additional transparency to both aging partners and the mayor's office. I'd be open to any questions.
Do we have any questions? Yes, Benny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jones, would you, just for the sake of the record, tell us what your agency does, how many people you serve, and how many locations you have?
Sure. We have 5 locations in the city of Lincoln. We serve over 6,500 independent consumers. with about 250,000 units of service, which includes congregate meals, home-delivered meals. We provide extensive care management services that goes into the homes of seniors to assist them to stay as independent as possible. That's much of what the city supports. We also have a health and fitness program that's federally funded and a Medicaid waiver program that provides in-home services to those that are have the lowest means and are in need of medical assistance to remain in their home. Otherwise, they would be in nursing homes.
And this ordinance does nothing to interrupt that service. It's basically
Absolutely
a
not,
way to
no.
continue it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Randy? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whew. And thank you, Randy, for contacting me prior to the public hearing. Would it be, help me understand why not before now? Would it be fair to say the pandemic and our budget situation might have prompted action now since the agency's been long in existence?
Well, it would be, I think, better for the mayor's office to speak to what prompted it. It was a discussion we had during the budget process with the mayor's office. It's an action that makes sense, and just thought now was the time. I went back and looked at history, and when you look at past organizational charts, there is no aging partners. When you look at past city public reports, there is no aging partners specified, even though we've been acting as a city department and have the same authority as the city department. So I think this just writes things where they should have been a long time ago.
And I agree, just so you know, and I certainly support your work, and it makes perfect sense to me. I'm just curious as to why not before now, like many things
Absolutely.
we do. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have a question. Thank you. Good afternoon, Randy. So you said in your presentation that there'd be no financial differences, no fiscal.
Correct.
But can you tell me a little bit about how it logistically works, sort of organizationally? So what's different now once you've become a separate department than what it's been for 20 years?
The difference is strictly adding it to the city ordinances where it doesn't exist today.
Okay.
So it should have been recognized a long time ago in that capacity, and it was overlooked.
Okay, so no staffing change, no address change, nothing, okay.
All in the past, we've always come to council with a budget for your approval. The city funds aging partners at about 45% of our total budget. We still will receive federal and county funding, and we'll have to go to those sources to continue asking for that support. But that will not change.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Jones?
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else would like to come forward and speak on this item? Item 6A. Seeing none, let's move on.
Item 6B is change of zone 20009, application of Civil Design Group on behalf of Tuscany Townhomes LLC, Perry Family Real Estate LLC, and Sherry True for a change from R3 Residential District to R3 PUD to allow up to 130,000 square feet of commercial floor area and up to 322 single and multifamily dwelling units with waivers to the zoning and subdivision regulations on property generally located at South 59th Circle and Pine Lake Road.
You want, okay, go ahead, Tammy.
I understand, Mr. Chair, there is a request to delay from the applicant by 1 week, I believe, public hearing on this item. So I would so move that we do so.
Second?
Been moved and seconded by Jane that we delay public hearing and action for next week. Any comments? Hearing none, please call the roll on that item.
Ward,
Yes.
Rabel,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, should we go back and call items 6A and B?
Okay, item 6A is amending Title II of the Lincoln Municipal Code to create a Department of Aging by adding Chapter 2.40 entitled Department of Aging to the Lincoln Municipal Code and amending Section 2.02.020 to recognize Department of Aging as a city department within the city's administration, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Washington, seconded by Shob. Any comments or questions?
This
Yes,
is a good thing.
I was waiting for that. Any other? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Shob,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, let's move on to third reading of ordinances.
Item 7A is annexation 20007, application of Starotska Lewis LLC to annex approximately 19.15 acres on property generally located at Northwest Dubois Street and West Big Sky Road, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve 7A. Any other comments, questions for staff? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Raybold,
Yes.
Shob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7B is change of zone 20012, application of Starotska Lewis LLC from AG Agriculture District to R3 Residential District on property generally located at Northwest Dubois Street and West Big Sky Road, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve 7B. Any other comments, questions for staff? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ward,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Shob,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7C, annexation 20008, application of Starotska Lewis LLC to annex approximately 49.32 acres on property generally located at North 105th Street and Century Lane, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Washington, seconded by Ms. Ward. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Shob,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7D, change of zone 20013, application of Starotska Lewis LLC from AG Agriculture District to R3 Residential District on property generally located at North 105th Street and Century Lane, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve this item. Any comments, questions? I will have one, that we are now annexing ground and zoning, and we'll have housing out at least to 105th and maybe all the way to 112th. So Lincoln is still a growing city, and we're still having a lot of people invest in our city, which is a good thing. Any other questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Christensen,
Yes.
Shob,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7E, approving the City of Lincoln, Nebraska redevelopment agreement for the Central Hotel 13th and O redevelopment project between O Street Holdings LLC and the city relating to redevelopment of property generally located at 1317, 1319, and 1325 O Street, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Washington and seconded by Mr. Christensen. Any other comments? This is a good thing. Okay, please call a roll.
Shob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7F is amending the fiscal year 1920 CIP to authorize and appropriate $385,000 in TIF funds for the Central Hotel 13th and O redevelopment project, generally located at 1317, 1319, and 1325 O Street, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Mr. Shob. Any other comments, questions?
I like that the alley's going to get fixed up.
Housing.
Alleys are good.
Housing, alley.
Okay. Any others? Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7H, approving a master lease agreement between the city and Windstream Nebraska, Inc. to place small cell facilities on city light poles, providing details for renewals, rent, application fee, and other regulatory issues, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7I. Oh, I'm sorry, I believe I skipped
H.
item
7G.
7G. Okay. I will call item 7G is authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds for the Central Hotel 13th and O redevelopment project in the amount not to exceed $385,000, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded by Jane. That we approved 7G. Any other comments or questions?
I just want to also say that I'm really happy that the alley is going to get fixed up too. So,
Housing. It's about housing.
It's a great alley.
yeah.
Any other comments? Please call the roll.
Raybold,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Okay, my apologies on that. Back on track.
Now
Item
scooters.
7I. Ordinance amending Ordinance 20825 to extend the term of the Shared Mobility Device Pilot Program, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we extend the Shared Mobility Device Pilot Program. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Please call the roll.
Bowers,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7J, amending Title IX of the Lincoln Municipal Code to create a separate offense for a person who violates any chapter under this title with the intent to intimidate another person or persons due to that person's actual or perceived status, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Washington, second by Ms. Ward. Do we have some comments and questions? Yes, Roy.
I'd like to move a substitute ordinance, motion to amend, that are passed out to the council. You'll take a look at that. I'd like a second for discussion purposes.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we amend the motion with the amendment that's been placed in front of us.
Beginning on line 8 is where the important changes begin. You see underlined, if a person is found guilty of violating any of the following code sections of the City of Lincoln, Section 9.12.010, assault and battery, menacing threats, Section 9.20.050, disturbing the peace, Section 9.24.100, destruction of property, and the trier of fact determines that such a person intentionally selected the victim of such crime or intentionally selected the property that was damaged by the crime because of race, color, religion, physical or mental disability, national origin, age, ancestry, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression of the victim or the owner or occupant of the property, then the penalty upon conviction shall include a minimum imprisonment in the county jail for a period not less than 10 days. The reason I'm bringing this forward is I've got some real concerns about the language about intent to intimidate, and I also believe that as proposed, this is overly broad. It includes all of Title IX as a possible crime, where we would add another possible crime to it. There's been discussion that this is not a speech issue, but while the mayor has labeled this a hate crime, her examples of instances where the law would be used, which were specifically graffiti on a synagogue and graffiti on trees, swastikas, and comments regarding Asian individuals and the COVID-19. These are all expressions of speech that would fall under the First Amendment protections in many situations. And I find this uncomfortable. So the proposed ordinance, as I see it, has some flaws about being overly broad, undefined. There's no real definition in there of what intent to intimidate means. And for these reasons, I brought forward this substitute ordinance.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Yes,
Yes,
Benny?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to have someone from our legal counsel come up and help me understand a few pieces
About
of
ready
this.
to see if he would like to come forward.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney.
Mr. Kirkpatrick, thank you very much. Like my fellow council members, I received lots of email this week from residents of our community saying this was a hate speech ordinance and they wanted us to oppose a hate speech ordinance. Mr. Christensen doesn't say that in his resolution, but he talks about enhancements. I'm really confused on what we're doing here.
Well, to address the question of hate speech, this does not apply to hate speech. If you pass this today, goes into effect, next week you can have people walking up and down in front of the courthouse carrying flags talking about KKK, supporting the KKK. You can have people carrying swastika flags in front of the South Street Temple. All they're doing is expressing speech. This doesn't apply to them at all. In order for this ordinance to apply, a crime has to be committed. And so when we look, for example, at the swastikas were painted on the South Street Temple, that was not a matter of freedom of speech. That was a matter of destruction of property. And a matter of fact, it was a significant matter of destruction of property, so much that I believe a felony was filed because it cost thousands and thousands of dollars to repair the damage. You have to have an underlying crime. Because this is in our city ordinance, you have to have an underlying crime that is in our city criminal code. And that's the only way that you can bring a citation under this proposed ordinance, and you can't get a conviction unless you can first prove up the underlying crime.
So that was the original ordinance you're talking about.
The original one, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Christensen proposed an enhancement to that.
Well, the enhancement is a different part of it. So when we were looking at hate crime laws around the country, nationally, state level, and local level, many of them, including the state of Nebraska, addresses that with an enhancement. So if you're convicted, for example, South Street Temple, if that person who is alleged to have damaged that property is convicted of that crime, and then the hate crime element enhances it, and so it raises the level of the punishment to which he could be punished. That's how an enhancement works. When we looked at it, and there are a number of cities that have that enhancement element because they have a different criminal code structure. They have different levels of punishment. We essentially only have the one. I mean, you could say we have two because we have infractions, and we also have city misdemeanors. But we don't have classes of misdemeanors. Like we do on the state level, for example, we have different classes of state misdemeanors, different classes of state felonies. We have city misdemeanors, one class. Well, how can you enhance a class? Our penalties, and usually there's no minimum, there's some offenses where there's a minimum, but the maximum is $500 fine, 6 months in jail, or any combination thereof. That's what the maximum is. You can't go above that. In fact, even if you as a city council wanted to go above that, you couldn't because we are conscribed by state law to that penalty. So we'd have to change state law in order to raise that penalty. So having the enhancement part of it is really wasn't an option for us. And that's why we opted for the structure that was originally before you and still may be before you today, which says it's a separate offense. You have to prove the predicate offense first, but once you've done that, then you've got a separate violation of the city code that a person can be found guilty of and punished for.
Thank you.
Okay. Sandra?
Mr. Kirkpatrick, is this the same thing as if you're stopped for speeding and you're not wearing a seatbelt and you're texting on your phone? Is that the same kind of thing? You're not going to get pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt, but if they've stopped you for speeding and you don't have a seatbelt, you're not wearing it.
That would be one way of thinking of it. I mean, in those secondary offenses, you can't be pulled over for the suspicion that you're not wearing your seatbelt.
Right.
So it operates somewhat differently, but if you think about it, you can't get to the seatbelt until you've got some other traffic offense. Yes, it works essentially the same way.
All right, and this is worded, the amendment that we have before us by Councilman Christensen is worded a little differently, where it says that your penalty is only imprisonment. It doesn't have a fine, but it says a minimum of 10 days. Is that a typical or unusual way to word a penalty?
It's not unusual to have a mandatory minimum. The difficulty we have, legally speaking, with a mandatory minimum in city ordinance is we have many parallel offenses to state law. Where DWI, for example, DWI is against the state law. We have a city ordinance that is essentially identical, with identical punishments. That's allowable. And we have some city ordinances that are not paralleled in state law, and for those offenses, we can put in any penalty we want to that's equal to or less than that state law ceiling of $500 fine, 6 months in jail.
Okay.
What we cannot do is we cannot impose a penalty that is in excess for the same crime as there is a state crime. But the penalty is actually excessive. And so when we look at the assault charge, for example, there is a parallel state crime. And there is a range of punishment in state law. There is no mandatory minimum in state law. And so if you were to pass this, you would be passing a city ordinance that had a penalty that was in excess of state law. And we think if you did that, it would be likely to be challenged. It may well fail, legally speaking. For that reason, it's in excess of what the state law allows.
Thank you. And then if the chairman would give me just one more. Okay, thank you so much. So I see the desire. I mean, we all received the same letters this week. And so people were asking very specifically about Title IX and some unusual things like party houses and things. And I was going through Title IX and trying to also just make certain I understood what the crimes were. But arson, does arson show up as destruction of property, or is it a separate offense?
You're quizzing me on the exact wording of Title IX, and I would fail. I would say that is an example of something where you could have different types of charges that prosecutors would look at. And there may be 2 or 3, some examples of offenses that they could choose to charge. And there it becomes a matter of judicial discretion and a matter of what the practice is within the office, because they try to remain consistent. So it shouldn't matter if Rob is doing the charging that week or if Marcy's doing the charging. I mean, there's some discretion, but they try to remain consistent. So, got lucky I didn't have Marcy charging this week. It was Rob. So that's part of what guides that. But if I can go back to what I think is your essential question, which is, okay, the original draft talks about all of Title IX, nothing outside of Title IX. It has to be within the criminal code, so you could not receive a hate crime citation for violating the housing code, which was Councilman Christensen's question last week, and a good one. Why wouldn't we, when we drafted this, why didn't we just limit them to the code sections that is in the amendment? He's got 3 in this amendment. I talked with our chief prosecutor about his amendment today, and I said, well, common sense reading, you look at those 3 charges, when you think of hate crimes, most of the charges, if not all of them, would fall within these 3 code sections. And she says that's true. When she thinks through the cases she's seen and learned about, 95% or 95% plus would be within these three code sections. Those are the most likely that they would charge and see that hate crime element that they would feel comfortable charging.
Mm-hmm.
But by bringing all of Title IX within the draft proposal we put in front of you, we have given the prosecutors an additional tool in the toolbox for those unusual cases. And when I was talking with Councilwoman Raybold earlier, the example I used was, what if somebody broke into your backyard and stole your dog and left you a note that said, because of your religion, you're a sinner, you don't deserve to have a pet, and that's why I stole your dog. Now, that's an invasion of your property. It's also a theft. Under the city code, we could charge larceny, we could charge trespassing. But that note that was left shows that there was a clear intent not only for them to get your dog, and not only for them to violate your property line, but also to intimidate you, to make you fearful, not because they didn't like you as a person, but because of your religion, because of your classification.
Okay.
And so by including all of Title IX, we give ourselves room for those very, very rare occasions where someone committed a crime outside of those three examples, and we felt comfortable that we could show a court, a judge beyond a reasonable doubt, that the intent to intimidate was part of the crime.
Thank you so much, and Mr. Chair, thank you for allowing me that much time.
That's fine. Sandra? Yes, Jane?
Well, I don't have any questions for Jeff because you answered them all previously, but like Councilmember Shob, I did have some questions on helping us decipher and dig down deeper on what this meant. So I also reached out to Mendy Rush Chipman, who is our Director of Human Rights, to, okay, help me understand what this amendment will limit us to or open us up to. And I think one of the most important things that she wrote back to me is that, you know, hate crimes often target not a particular person, not an individual, but rather an entire group or community of people. And the substitute version presented by Councilman Christensen really narrows that scope and of who would qualify as a victim, as an individual. But we know that these type of attacks and verbal abuse are really geared, and acts of aggression and intimidation are geared towards particular communities of color, of faith, LGBTQ status, etc. So I thought that helped me understand it a lot better. And like Jeff had mentioned, that the way that this substitute amendment is, it really narrows it down to just three classifications, albeit it seems like the most logical application of this hate crime ordinance, hate intimidation ordinance would fall under. But she also indicated that criminal offenses under Title IX that could be motivated by hate and bigotry but would not be captured under the substitute version, such as aiding and abetting, threats or false information, larceny, depositing refuse matter on premises of another, loitering, trespassing. If the council feels that some of those offenses under Title IX should not be included, then they should be excluded, and it should be called out accordingly, rather than just limiting it to just the three indicated in the substitute amendment. And you know, the other thing that she brought up is something that I would not have thought of, but I'm really glad she suggested, is that the substitute version only captures offenses that target an individual because of their actual characteristic. So this is problematic because as many victims of hate crimes were targeted because the offender perceived them to be a protected classification. They perceived them to be black. So if the offender who committed that hate intimidation act was incorrect, that person was not black or that person wasn't Catholic, then the perpetrator cannot be convicted of the hate crime under this revision. So I think, respectfully, I appreciate your listening to constituents, as we have received many emails concerning this and the confusion. But I really feel that having gotten further clarification, I feel very comfortable with the original version, and so I will not support this amendment that was introduced by Councilman Christensen.
Any other comments or thoughts at this point on the amendment to the motion? Seeing none, please call the roll for the amendment.
Christensen,
Yes.
Schob,
No.
Ward,
No.
Washington,
No.
Raybold,
No.
Bowers,
No.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion lost, 7-2.
Failed.
A motion failed.
So now we're back to the main motion. Would anybody like to talk on the main motion? Yes. Ms. Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm in support of the ordinance as drafted, and I just want to reiterate 3 points from last week's hearing, with the public hearing. And one is to remind people that this was not drafted in response to our civil unrest in our community. It was has been drafted months ago, and our city attorney can attest to that in his office. So just please remember, it's not in response. Some people that testified last week said it was a knee-jerk response by the city, and that is not the case. So please keep that in mind. We have had a lot of emails, a lot of letters, a lot of phone calls, and I just want to say to those who think that it's un-American to pass this ordinance, I want to say I think it's un-American not to do this. It's the time is right. The Lincoln Journal editorial board, for those of us that read those, said that June 4th. If not now, I ask you when. And it's really important to me, and I get really passionate about this issue. We're in the midst of a civil rights movement in this country and in this city, and I just have to say, again, with all due respect to our colleague, Mr. Christensen, who's uncomfortable with this language, I'm sorry, but we don't get to be uncomfortable. We don't have I don't have that privilege to be uncomfortable. We have got to do this. And again, to those who don't think who think it's un-American to do this, I say look at our colleagues. I know that Councilman Bowers has been threatened on the streets of this city because of his sexuality. And Councilman Schob was an NAACP board member. I don't know if you still are. They have written us and begged us to pass this. And Councilwoman Washington has her own stories. So if you can't look beyond your own colleagues, how can we sit here and not pass this ordinance for the city of Lincoln? And for those of you, I look out and know the work you're doing on our streets every day to make this community better and safer and more just. It is now. And so, sorry, I'm getting so passionate about this. So that's what I have to say. That's why I support the original ordinance. I thank the law department and Mr. Kirkpatrick for all the work he's done, and I urge my colleagues to vote for this very important ordinance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Yes, Roy?
Well, I want to make it clear that I am not against the idea that we need to be inclusive, we need to stand against hate in our community. My concerns, I think, were expressed. My fellow council members gave them consideration. I appreciate that. As you'll note, I was not trying to just get rid of this. I was trying to amend it to something that I was impressed that would stand a better chance of lasting. I still believe that the current version that we're going to vote on next has a probability of being challenged and failing in court. However, it's very important that this body send the message loud and clear to our community that we do not tolerate hate. Therefore, I will support this.
Yes, Jane?
I just briefly want to commend all my councilmen's efforts and comments as they go truly to the heart of the matter. Hate tears a community apart, no matter what form it presents itself to that community. And as elected officials, we must stand up, we must speak out, we must do everything that we can to keep people in our community safe, and this is a step in the right direction.
Anyone else like to speak? Any comments? Okay, James?
I had tried to figure out exactly what I was going to say about this ordinance, and I went through multiple drafts about what I wanted to comment on this. And I had a hard time stringing the words together because this is something that I consider very personal. This is something that I think back to experiences that I had in my own life. One of the things that's frustrating about this is we received emails over the weekend is the deliberate misinformation and the deliberate lies that were said about what this ordinance does and what this ordinance covers. As I received memos and emails, I looked through every single Supreme Court case that was mentioned. I did my due diligence. I did my homework. And I believe now more than ever that this is constitutional. This is not about banning speech. What this does is this protects people and gives them a right to be able to hold people who want to instill hate and terror in our community accountable. Speaking specifically within the LGBT community, when we talk about perceived and actual, not every single person is out of the closet. People come out at their own time. And to say that a person has to deliberately out themselves in order to get this protection is not okay and is not acceptable and is not a standard that we should have. The standard that we should have for our community is that hate crimes will not be tolerated in our community. So I will be voting in support of this ordinance. My research has shown that this is constitutional. This is what is best for our community, and it sends one great message to the next generation that we will not tolerate hate.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the last week, actually 2 weeks since this was read into the record, we have, as noted by my colleagues, received dozens and dozens of emails, of letters, postcards, phone calls, telling us why this would be a bad thing to do. They've said that this is going to criminalize thought, that we were trying to get inside the heads of people and tell them what they could and could not think, and that we were criminalizing speech. Both of those things are wrong, massively wrong. I have always looked to the Constitution, not because we are able to uphold the greatest values of the Constitution, but because it is a wonderful document that sets up a goal post for this country that says if we live up to our highest ideals, if we constantly look to the Constitution and it remains the hallmark of our country, it says that everyone has freedom of speech. This does not do anything to change what people are allowed to say, even if it is hateful. You may say anything you want. But what it also says is that each and every person who lives in this country is valuable, has the right to exist, has the right to be themselves, free of intimidation. And that's why it is the most American thing we can do. And for people who believe that this is a knee-jerk reaction to the last couple of weeks or is a new and fashionable trend, they're not paying attention. Hate crime ordinances, laws against hate crimes, have been enacted in this country since 1968. We're way beyond when we should have done this. I'm glad we're doing this today.
Thank you.
Your mic's off.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody's comments and thoughts and a lot of emotions. And so this is something that was probably long in coming, but needed to be here. So any other comments? Please call a roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, our next item on the agenda is Section 8, Resolutions First Readings, item 8A through 8C. Section 9 are ordinances first reading and related resolutions, items 9A through 9D. And then we have our pending list items that are items 10A through 10E.
Yes, right.
I'd like to say, remember the golden rule, and I move adjournment.
Been moved and
Second.
seconded by Ms. Washington. Are we going and adjourn this meeting? Please call the roll.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.